You made it to level 2, deeper questions leading to deeper answers. I'm Tomas Garza, and I'm here to help you decide to transform. I'll be setting the pace for the process to support your unfolding. Learn and commit to a practice that brings simplicity and an awareness of what is ready to be released. Join me now and allow the experience of a deeper sense of love. Hello, and welcome to Decide to Transform. I'm your host, Tomas Garza, and joining me today from Zanesville, Ohio, is my very special guest, Rachel Matz. Rachel has a coaching business called The Embodied Goddess for women's embodiment, sexual liberation, and business mastery. Now, she and her husband co-own Fourth and Market, which is a 3-story historic building in their hometown of Zanesville, Ohio, which they've transformed into a yoga, wellness, and fitness hub. Rachel also hosts international yoga retreats and teacher trainings each year, and is the first-time author of I Am Worthy, which is available right now on ebook with the printed edition slated to come out the first week of September. Rachel, you and I have talked a little bit beforehand, and I'm really looking forward to having you as my guest here today. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. It's a joy and pleasure to be here.
This is all right. Well, thank you. Yeah, this is fun. And guys, what's really interesting is let's launch in right on your book as the topic coming up here. The title instantly grabs people. I Am Worthy. So as a first-time author, first of all, congratulations on this coming out. Yeah, I know what a lot of work that is. So
yes.
yeah. And now that the ebook has been out, then I guess my very first question is, what prompted you to write a book about this? Because you've got some very deep experience here.
Yeah. So I had been thinking about writing a book and had been told just by friends and various people over the years that I should write a book, maybe the past 5 years or so. And I dove into, I kind of call it a therapy immersion program. It was a woman who is a mental health counselor. She does some coaching, and she also was the head of my yoga teacher trainings that I did in Bali and in Costa Rica. And she obviously does like traditional therapy, but then has sort of mixed it in with elements of just more of the modern day, like coaching as we know of it today. And so I did this 8-week program with her, and it just stirred up everything.
Yes.
And I was in a pretty low place when I reached out to her, kind of into a place where, and I talk about this in the intro of the book, it's like this like time for change moment where you're gonna drown or explode if you don't do something different. And that was kind of like the pivot point that I was in. And so I did this therapy program with her, and through, the stirring up of things and then the kickstarting into some healing of wounds and trauma that I really hadn't even been aware of in my conscious mind up until that point.
Okay.
And I started writing poems, and the poems are actually kind of scattered throughout the book, and they're often written in third person, like she. And so then poems started to evolve in more like first person writing and sharing eventually on social media. And so then it was just kind of like an evolution from there. Poems became more honest, like first person writings. And then I was like, okay, I really might turn this into a book. And so by the time quarantine last year rolled around, I had all sorts of time with our building not being open. And just maybe like a week or two into quarantine, I was like, I'm gonna like actually write this book. I'm gonna stop talking about it and I'm gonna write it. So it's really my own personal healing story. I'm 32 years old now, and I feel like it's just the synopsis of my 32 years of life and healing, and how I went from a place of really deeply rooted body shame, spiritual shame, shame of being a woman, into a place where like I can confidently say with every cell in my body now that I believe and know that I'm worthy. So that's kind of the journey behind the story.
Okay. So it's a comprehensive healing journey in that case. Okay. Well, I
Yeah.
know that there are people out there that can relate to having a deep, visceral level time for change moment. Can you tell us more about the time for change moment? What was going on, and what did come up for you?
Yeah. So initially, I thought what was the most overwhelming at that time was the fact that I was a business owner. I was managing, I think, like 12 to 14 other women out of my yoga studio at that time.
Okay.
And I, up to that point, really had no formal business training. I was a
Sure.
massage therapist and a yoga instructor, and like had been a team captain on basketball teams all the way through college level. So I was very comfortable being a leader, but I, found out that being a business owner and a manager in a business setting is very different. And so I felt like in the business side of things, I was
Yeah.
drowning.
Yeah, I gotcha. I
um,
gotcha.
but what I discovered is that uh, for the first time in my life, I did a bunch of childhood regression work with her. And so I discovered some really hard truths about just childhood in general, and things that I had experienced that I honestly thought up to that point that my life had been perfect, like as good as it could get, that there was no, like, I would compare myself to other people and they have stories of divorce and death or addiction, or like these horrible stories that I'd heard other people share. And I always felt like my life was boring, and there was no real like reason that I had to feel like I'd ever experienced any trauma, or that I had any reason to feel ashamed. Like I think I even write this in the book. I felt ashamed that my shame wasn't enough to feel ashamed of. Like I
Okay.
just
Hmm.
I think I was just so unaware of just like little T trauma in my life that had gone on, and maybe some big T trauma too. But so I pretty quickly discovered that what I really was drowning in and what I really needed help with was, just for the first time, a deep dive into my childhood and ancestral line. And yeah, so it kickstarted personal healing and pain and shame and trauma that had been living in my body that I just discounted as like stress from like early adulthood, like an early marriage, and stress from as a new business owner. And I quickly discovered that there was a lot more there to be like unveiled.
Okay. All right. It was deeper than it appeared. Yeah. All right. So then, do you talk about in the book what specifically you learned about childhood trauma?
Yeah, a little bit. I like as a young girl, I had a lot of freedom. Like my parents never really put me in a box. I did like quote unquote like masculine things and was accepted for that, and feminine things and was accepted for that. But I
Mhm.
I talk about what I feel like was maybe a pivot point in my shame as a girl. In middle school, I remember sitting in math class, and I could like overhear, I think it was like my boyfriend at the time and some other guys at the time, and they were like concocting this perfect girl out of a bunch of like our friend group. So like
Oh,
it was like this girl this dream girl had like this girl's face, and then it had like this girl's butt, and then it had this girl's boobs. And they told me like they had my legs, and I was like, oh, wow. Like, wow, that's great. And I remember feeling like super embarrassed, and it's just like something small. Like, I know it's not like crazy traumatizing or like that I was being bullied by any means, but that was like the first thing that I can remember feeling like, oh, like my body isn't the same as her body, isn't the same as her body. And so that was like the earliest moment I can recall of feeling shame around my body. And I definitely, I mean, I have a strong personality. And I am a very independent woman, and was a very independent little girl. So I definitely think that I also collected flavors of feeling like I was too much for my family, or feeling like I was too much a lot of the time. So I definitely think that even earlier than that, there was some shame around too muchness, but it was really like in middle school where I can connect the earliest versions of body shame.
Okay. Yeah. And when did you become aware of the shame around too muchness?
Yeah. When I started that therapy program,
Okay.
is when it really hit me. And my therapist, or my coach's name, is Liz. And she said flat out to me at one point, like, Rachel, you are not too much. You've never been too much, and you're not too much. And I was just kind of like, whew. Like, I think I sobbed, because I had always felt like I was too much,
Okay.
because I just kind of operate differently than a lot of people. And I definitely operate differently than most of my family, or all of my family. And I thought that meant I was too much. And so that was like, literally, I think 28 years old. The first person said like to
Okay.
me, you are not too much. And I believed it.
Okay. Well, that's quite a cathartic moment. And it's so interesting because I think everyone listening to this show can relate to that. A number of them I know for a fact are that person in their family that does things really differently. And it's difficult to understand why everyone else does things the same. So, I mean, I still haven't figured that one out, by the way. So, when you get that answer, let us know. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Right. Yeah. Well, now this is really interesting because it had taken place in the context of yoga. So, and a teacher training. So when did you take up yoga? When did that become prominent for you?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I played basketball in college, and
Hmm. Yeah.
it was all consuming. No
Okay.
regrets. I loved it. I played all 4 years. My last 2 years, I was the team captain. And so I just figured out how to thrive. But it
Mhm.
was also probably up to that point, the hardest 4 years of my life. And so I remember by like junior year, I was just needing something that was not competition based. And
Okay.
also, like, up to that point, I'd had a very strong connection to, like, Christianity was my avenue at that time for
Mhm.
spirituality and just a personal relationship with God. And so I just started seeking for something that was maybe still a little movement based, but that started to like create this mind, body, spirit connection. And so I just
Yeah.
did like, I would do yoga in my dorm room on my own, like just through what I read through books, or would see occasionally online or something like that. So I think at first I was just kind of like reading books and making up my own stuff. And then for graduate school, I briefly moved to Princeton, New Jersey, and I started a master's degree in theology at the seminary there in Princeton. And so I thought I wanted to be a professor, a theology professor, but I also at that time got a job at the Lululemon in downtown Princeton.
Okay.
And
All
it's like
right.
very well known, like yoga brand, athletic wear brand.
Oh
And
yeah.
And so for working there, I got free yoga classes. And so that's really, I mean, I went to like every yoga class I possibly could in the Princeton area. And
Okay.
that's when I really fell in love with and learned on a deeper level about the practice. So that's really when it started formally, I guess.
Okay. Now, does this mean that you were at Princeton just for a short time, or did you end up leaving Princeton?
Yeah, I was only in that program for like 6 or 7 months. So I lived there for like 7 months, and I quickly determined that like an 8-year doctoral track in theology was not the route I in fact wanted to take. And so actually while I was still living in Princeton, I had already planned my next steps. So I knew when I moved back to Ohio, I was going to start massage therapy school. So as soon as I moved back, like a couple weeks later, I started into massage therapy school, and it was a year-long program. And then shortly after that, did my first yoga teacher training. So it was like very quickly graduate school, right into massage therapy and yoga. And yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it's so interesting that people take up things like yoga and different spiritual practices at different stages of their lives for a number of reasons. It's just interesting to me the role that this has played in your particular healing. Now, you're also a yoga teacher, trainer, and conduct retreats. So tell us about some of the retreats, because I know that people are out there wanting to go on a retreat someplace nice.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the retreats have become one of my very favorite things
Mhm.
because I love to travel. I have done a lot of travel over the years, really since college, and have gone to some pretty exotic places and have um, done some pretty neat treks. And I just realized like a lot of my travels would attract quite a bit of attention, and I would get responses kind of like, oh, I wish I could do that, or I would love to do that, or
Yeah.
whatever. And so I'm
Yeah.
like, why can't I create this opportunity for other people, especially in my area? I live in a small town, like rural area in southeastern Ohio, and people a lot of times from here don't leave Ohio, or like they'll only go to the Carolinas for vacation, which is wonderful. Not only meaning like it's not okay, but like they just
Mhm.
maybe wouldn't like take the initiative to see the rest of the world unless there was already that opportunity there.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so far, I've had large groups, mostly from this area, but not all from this area, go to Mexico and Belize. And we were supposed to go to Bali this past year, and it got moved back. So I have a Bali retreat scheduled for February of next year, and I have another Mexico retreat actually scheduled this year for November. And normally I offer daily yoga as a part of the experience, but it's also my intention that the experience is as cultural and authentic as possible too.
Cool.
So we generally have local food, and we might have like local ceremonies or go on snorkeling excursions or
Mhm.
hiking or shopping excursions of some kind. So it's really like a total mind, body, spirit experience. And we just kind of use yoga a little bit as a part of that whole like travel journey.
Oh, I love it. All right. What part of Mexico are you going to?
Zihuatanejo. So it's like
Mm.
southwestern, like Pacific Mexico.
Yeah.
It's so different than what most people I think of Mexico as like Cancun, Riviera
Sure.
Maya.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's very Pacific, like mountainous and rocky and deep blue water versus the Caribbean Mexico
Mhm.
that a lot of people are accustomed to.
Yeah. And for those of you out there listening, if you've never been there, it's awesome. It's very
Oh,
beautiful. Oh, yeah.
yeah, this will be my second Mexico retreat.
Okay.
And I'll get some pushback on it because I think a lot of people have like, I don't know, inaccurate view of Mexico, maybe just because
Oh,
of
big
the
time.
news media.
Yeah.
And I love Mexico. I would probably live in Mexico if my husband would let me, if
Oh,
he
yeah.
would go there too.
Well, maybe you all should do that.
I know. I know. Don't put it past me.
No, I won't. Yeah, yeah, I won't. It's it's so interesting because people will follow you on social media, and I can relate. I know a number of us can relate to getting lots of attention on the social media platform. All right, so you're going to Zihuatanejo now. I like the fact that you've got cultural experiences merged in there. How long are your retreats?
Generally, they're anywhere from 5 to 7 nights. The Bali
Okay,
retreat is 7 nights just because there's so much to see once you get there, as with anywhere, but it also just takes a very long time to get there from
sure.
Ohio. It's like well over a day of travel.
Oh yeah,
So it's
yeah.
worth staying there a little while once you get
Hmm.
there.
Okay. Yeah. Well, and this is so interesting. A theme that comes up in all of this to me is healing and deep healing. So, what type of healing is going on for you right now, and how has the experience of putting it all out there in a book impacted your journey?
Yeah. Oh gosh, this year has been like, just from January until now, definitely the largest amount of healing that I have felt up to this point in my life. And it's definitely been healing of body shame for what feels like once and for all. For me, at least at this
Oh,
point, I'm not a mother, so I'm sure there's new healing that happens if and when women become mothers. But up to
sure.
this point, I feel like once and for all, like the body shame stuff is just like healed and done.
Okay.
In Let's see. Well, in January, I actually went through a pretty major surgery. I had breast explant surgery. So when I was 23, I had breast implants put in. So I had
Hmm.
them for over 8 years and finally made the decision in January that I wanted them out. And so I definitely feel like that was
Okay.
like a major, major activator of just like propelling me into a whole new place of empowerment in my body and as a woman. And I shared a lot, like pretty publicly, about all of that on social media, and then
Okay.
also wrote about it a few different times throughout the book. And so this journey of coming back to my body, like in its original form, or as original as it gets 32 years later, like yeah,
Yeah.
so body healing, and womanhood healing, and healing around my sexuality and my desires. And so
Hmm.
I've really just totally reframed life, and instead of constantly being aware of everything that I don't want and trying to move away from that, I'm setting goals. I'm programming my subconscious. I'm thinking and speaking in ways that I'm moving towards what I want. Because I've realized, not just for me, but for all of the women that I've worked with, and I'm sure men too. I just don't get to work with men as often as I would like, but
Hmm.
um, we don't know what we want because you spend your whole life trying to people please,
Hmm.
and it shoves down so deep your own like pleasures and desires that when you get asked like what you actually want, I've noticed that most people have no idea. Like they can't even, they're not sure. Like they haven't thought about it. Most people are really aware of what they don't want. Um and they don't know what they want.
Yeah, and then often what comes up, doesn't it? I mean, you probably see this all the time, is people don't actually realize that they can have desires and ask for what they want.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's the thing, is that I think we've all been conditioned to believe that in order to succeed, in order to create abundance, in order to create wealth, in order to create intimacy or connection, that it's going to be hard, that has to be hard, and that has to involve the grind, and that it has to include suffering. We just aren't taught that you can actually create the life that you want, and that it can be easy, and that it can be joyful, and that it can be pleasurable, and that it's safe to ask for what you want to.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And I take it that's a message when you coach people that you drive home a lot, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yes. And that's been something, like I said, that I've just stepped into as of this year. So it's also just a newer concept and way of being in my own life now. So I by no means feel like an expert, but it's definitely changed my life.
Okay. Well, and this is one of the areas that you work on as a business owner and as a coach is women's sexuality. So would you say some more about that? Because a number of listeners out there might be curious. Okay, what does that work actually look like? What do you all do?
Yeah, sure. Good question. Well, I talk in my book about in a few different chapters. I go pretty in depth and raw and in an honest explanation about my marriage, and I've been together with my husband now for I think over 13 years.
Okay. Oh yeah.
And we'll soon celebrate our 8th year wedding anniversary in a few weeks. But
Right on.
so we've been together for a while, and as with any long-term relationship, lots changes. And
Yes.
you just, I think, at least for me, all I can speak on is my experience, but I had gotten to a point where I was just totally shut down. I was really, I would say, disassociated from my body, and yoga has been a big part. So for me, yoga and sexuality have kind of come hand in hand, in that yoga has started to bring me back deeper and deeper and deeper into just like associating and feeling safe and aware of things in my body. So yoga for me is definitely a part of the sexuality practice.
Sure.
But I have also incorporated and teach shaking meditation, which is really just kind of like spontaneous dance with music turned way up.
Okay.
So
Cool.
that for me has also become like a part of my regular sexuality and turn on rituals. I definitely recommend the book called Pussy by Regina. Oh, they call her Mama Gina.
All right.
But I forget, her last name is like Thomas Hauer or something like that. But Mama Gina wrote this book called Pussy and provides a lot of like intimate practices of just like mirror gazing different parts of your body. And there are practices that I talk with my yoga students about called yoni steaming, where you actually use like steam to start to reconnect to your body and reconnect to your sensuality and sexuality. And so those are practices that I have done. There are really like endless options, and I'm still learning them all. That's for sure. Like, I feel like it's never done. There's always more to explore in the realm of sexuality, but I talk about in my book how shut down I was and shut off I was. And I literally thought there was something wrong with me. Like, I remember various times Googling like that maybe I had an issue of some kind, like a physiological issue. And I, over the years, have come to the conclusion that I just didn't feel worthy. I didn't feel enough. I was ashamed of my womanhood. I was ashamed of my desires. I didn't even know how to speak about my desires to my partner romantically, or even just friends in more of a, friendly relationship or a work relationship with coworkers. And so I don't always feel like even the sexuality practice has to be what we all consider like modern day sex stuff. Like I think it can just be this journey of like coming back to your body and coming back to what feels good, and asking for what you want, and saying no to what you don't. So that's a little bit of what like my personal work looks like, and a little bit of what it looks like when I work with clients or when I work with yoga students around starting to step into their fullest expression, and stepping into a place where they feel safe to be heard and to be seen. Yeah.
Okay. Well, and what is the biggest challenge that people come to you with?
Good question. I would say really in this deeper level work, I've only worked with women, and I would say that they don't feel enough.
Okay.
Like the core wound, the core of it all in some way, shape, or form is that they don't feel enough. And so then we kind of explore into how that expresses itself, just like in their own internal dialogue and their self-talk, and then how that expresses itself in their relationships, and how that expresses itself in their business or their career. It spills into everything, but I think like at the core, the not enoughness is just the biggest thing that I see.
Okay. And you see that. And then what form does this take for a lot of the people that you work with? I know it's going to vary, but what do you see most often?
I think that it keeps people in loops of suffering. So for some, it might mean like literally lifelong scarcity, whether it's like in finances. Like I think financial scarcity is a big one. And also just like, yeah, I feel like scarcity is maybe like a good synopsis of it all. So the finances struggle. It might be that they are just like constantly looking for the next relationship, like just can't be happy with anyone. But I've also seen it look like a marriage that just like they're just shut down and they're just turned off, and they're kind of catering to the partner and what the other person wants. And I see it expressed as self-sabotage a lot. Like they're almost where they want to be. They've gotten focused and in alignment, and they start like maybe they're moving their body weekly for like 6 months, and then all of the sudden like they'll stop and they'll start drinking a bunch or gain 30 pounds back or whatever. Like they're almost there, and then they go back in the loop of suffering. So yeah, like you said, it's a little individualized from person to person, but I think it shows up as self-sabotage, as scarcity. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And of course, there are a lot of ways that people might need to or want to work through all of that. Now that you have changed the game by writing and publishing your first book, what is the number one thing that you've learned in that whole process?
Really just to keep showing up.
Okay.
I think so many people want to write a book,
Oh, yeah.
and like the hardest part is to keep showing up even on days where you're not sure if there's anything there, and to just like keep pouring out words, even if like there's this tendency to want to go back and edit what you've already written instead of just continuing to show up for more. And then once you've got your publisher, you're going to self-publish or whatever route that you go for the publishing, just to give like book metaphors at least. Like
Yeah.
it's easy then to want to like go back into hiding and be like, oh, I don't know, all this marketing, like creating this platform is a lot of work. And you just continually have to show up in higher and higher levels of yourself, or I did at least. And then
Oh, yeah.
on launch day, like I went live multiple times. And so I'm like showing up again, even in more, like I've never gone live like 4 times in one day before on social media. And so it's just this continual, like, just show up, just keep showing up, like, just keep coming. I say that for people coming to yoga, like, just show up. That's the hardest part.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're absolutely right. That's what it is for all of us, and anyone that accepts a teaching function, whatever that looks like, has to just keep showing up, because you don't know who's watching.
Yeah. Yeah. What I've found is generally a lot of people might even be like a year or years later, they're like, oh, I remember that one thing that you said or that you did in that yoga class or on that social media post. And I'm like, oh, I didn't even know anyone cared then or read that then.
Right. Yeah, because we can all have the experience as content creators. And I know a number of the listeners are out there that go live all the time. A number of folks are entrepreneurs themselves. So some days it feels like you're just going live and talking to yourself, but you never know. Right.
So true.
Yeah. Yeah. And people are listening to this. Part of the beauty of a podcast is you never know who's listening around the world, and they could be listening at 3 o'clock in the morning. Everything's on demand. So, Rachel, how can people purchase a copy of your book here?
Yeah. So the book is published through and sold on Amazon. So the ebook is available on Amazon, and it is available now on Amazon. And then the printed edition will become available like early September, but it is only on Amazon at this point.
Okay. Right. Yeah. So Amazon, and the title is I Am Worthy by Rachel Matz, Matz. Okay. Now, Rachel, how else can people get a hold of you if they would like to work with you?
Yeah, sure. So my favorite platform to be on is Instagram, and my handle is the Embodied Goddess. I think technically it's the embodied underscore goddess. So definitely on Instagram is a great way to just kind of get to know me and to see me most days. I'm also on Facebook just as Rachel Matz, and my husband and I's website is fourthandmarket.com, and there is information there about my yoga teacher trainings and retreats, but I also have links straight from my Instagram page for those as well. So
okay. And for the website then, Fourth and Market, is this fourth spelled out, or is it the number 4 th?
Yeah, good question. So it's 4th hyphen and hyphen market.com.
Okay, got it. Yes, fourth hyphen and hyphen market.com. Okay, perfect. But Instagram is the best place to reach you, and that's at the embodied underscore goddess. Okay, so now you've got a retreat coming up. Do you still have space for these retreats?
Yeah, I do. So the Mexico retreat in November is my first women's only retreat. So it is called Rooted Woman. And I at least have a couple rooms left for that retreat. So there's definitely still space there. And then my February retreat, I believe I have 3 rooms left, and anyone and everyone is welcome to that one. So it's just normal, all are welcome retreat.
Right.
And it's the 7-night experience for Bali, but the one in Mexico is 5.
All right. Well, and I know that there are people out there, they're listening to this right now, and they're yearning to travel someplace tropical and beautiful. Yeah. I think you all need to look Rachel up here. I do.
Yeah, I would love that.
I think people need to do this. Yes.
Yeah, especially with the Mexico one being in between, well, if you celebrate Thanksgiving and Christmas, it's right in between kind of like the craziest holidays of the year or the busiest holidays of the year. And I've traveled right before Christmas before, and I just have felt like it's so therapeutic to just like get your Christmas stuff or whatever stuff ready early, and then just get out and focus on yourself and slow things down and turn your attention inward. It's really been therapeutic for me to exit the hustle and bustle of the holidays and then just come home and right before the holidays celebrate family.
I love it. Okay. Yeah, that's wonderful. And well, all right, listeners. So this is Bali, 7 nights in Bali, 5 nights in Mexico. Yeah, get a hold of Rachel for more information because the retreats are going to keep coming. I can feel that. No question.
Yes.
All right. So, Rachel, I've learned a great deal, and I know that people have learned a great deal, and there are a lot of things that we've talked about here today. What would be your closing message for people listening to this show? What would you like to leave them with?
I am someone, and I know not everyone is like this, but I think a lot of people are like this, that could spend all day, every day in my head. And so like, movement always brings me back to groundedness, to center. But really, I think finding ways to come back to your body or to come into your body for the first time, whether it is through something like yoga or just like a nature walk or a quick 5-minute sit in silence at your house or in your bed before you start your day. I really just feel like finding ways, especially now where the external noise, the news media, all the craziness going on in the world is so loud, and the advice giving is really loud, and the speed just keeps getting faster and faster and faster. And I feel like the most therapeutic thing that we could all be doing right now is tuning things out to come back to our own voice and slowing down to come back to our own body and turning inward to really listen from the internal space of inner knowing and truth. And so I think that looks different for everyone. So I don't know how helpful that is, but I just really feel like everything is so loud and so chaotic and so messy. And it's the perfect invitation to come back to ourselves more than anything else.
Yeah, I think that is. And I think as adults, as we all know, we're all super stubborn, which means we need to hear things multiple times from multiple different people. So
Yeah.
I think it's a message that everyone needs, quite honestly. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for taking the opportunity to join me here today. This has been a real pleasure. It's been really, really wonderful having you as a guest on the show today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I really have enjoyed our conversation so much. So thank you.
You're most welcome. And guys, don't forget here to pick up the ebook, I Am Worthy. It's available right now on Amazon. And there's no reason to hold out even to the beginning of September when you could download this right away. But the hardcover or paperback edition, the actual physical book, is coming out the first week of September, but you can grab that ebook right now. All right, guys. So this has been Decide to Transform with Rachel Matz. Thank you all for joining us here today.